John, thank you so much for joining me today in my kitchen. I buy all my guest presents, and I bought you something which I think is quite interesting. I read that you do yoga every day. Is this true?
Not every day, every year I do it.
I thought you were into yoga.
I go on a retreat. My wife does it every day, and I go on a retreat for 2 weeks a year. Yeah.
So I normally buy people alcohol, but I thought, well, if you're doing that sort of stuff, I went to one of these really poncy shops, and I bought you the most ridiculously expensive honey because I thought that would be the sort of... You're not a vegan, are you?
No.
Okay. So this is Home Counties honey. The bloke in the shop told me this is the best honey you can get because it's from our local area. Here we go.
I must just ask you though, Tim, are they free-range bees?
Do you like honey?
I love honey. Who could not?
I've also read about you, which is interesting. And I don't know where I've got this from, and I've been trying to get it back, but I managed to note it down that you're really into self-knowledge, and you've taken interest in Indian gurus and things. Is this true? A book that's called I Am That.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is to me? I love all this sort of stuff. That's the sort of stuff we do on the podcast.
It's it's by a guy called Nisargadatta, and he was a tobacconist in Mumbai, Bombay as was.
Yeah.
And he spent his whole day rolling in a tiny little shop, like a hut, a little shed, rolling handmade cigarettes for people and selling them, 3 a day or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And somebody said, there's a guru in town, you ought to go and see him. And so he went to see this bloke. He had no interest in spirituality or, self-knowledge or anything else. Went to see this bloke, and the guy said, I advise you to consider every day when you have a spare minute, who are you? And so he goes, okay, I'll do that. And so as he's rolling these cigarettes, he thought about that. And after a few years, he suddenly had a blinding flash of understanding. And he knew who he was, and which most of us don't.
And you wrote a book.
He wrote a book called I Am That.
And what does it mean, though? So,
well, essentially, it's like everybody's connected to everybody else, and who you are personally there's a deeper connection. It's the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi describes it as if you're looking out over the Aegean, okay, and all these little islands poking out, Delos and Skopelos or whatever, like little points in this flat blue surface. Of course, they look separate, but underneath, they're actually just the peaks of mountain ranges, aren't they? They're all connected. It's only really one mountain. So all these things, I know it sounds a bit weird and spooky when you first come across it, but this kind of way of looking at the world is not unscientific, it's not religious, it's a way of really opening your eyes to what is actually the case rather than what appears to be the case.
And did you go looking for this, or did you just chance upon it?
No, I had a horrific midlife crisis in my early 40s. I was a very conventionally successful, perhaps too successful, now I think about it, teleproducer, and I won lots and lots of awards, and I just started directing ads. I was a completely of-the-world person. I was not religiously inclined, or I was just wanting to be best, I wanted to win prizes and do well and all that kind of stuff, and I was very absorbed in my work. I worked very, very hard from the time I started at 22 to 42, 20 years of insanely overworking. And I just hit the buffers. I just suddenly thought, what's the point of doing this? I've got everything. I've got a house. I've got 2 kids. I've got some money in the bank, fortunately, car. What now? Am I supposed to go on doing this forever? It's awfully hard work. And I sort of got very confused, first of all, and then very angry and depressed. And the first 3 years were absolutely terrible. I mean, really, I was kind of bereft. I was a high-functioning depressive. I still went to work and made cheese commercials every day, but I had this weird life of, rushing off and doing an ad for Barclaycard or Dime Bar with Harry Enfield, in the evening reading Spinoza. And so it's not just decent gurus, it's what they call the Perennial Philosophy, and it's there from, the pre-Socratic Greeks like Parmenides and Heraclitus, and it's in Marcus Aurelius in Roman philosophy, and it's in Zen Buddhism, and it's in Hinduism and Taoism, and in Chinese philosophy, and ultimately it's all the same thing,
Well, I don't know if you know, the reason why this podcast started originally was I had read so many self-help books, and I sat with Mark. We used to work doing radio together. We said, let's start a podcast. What should it be about? And I said, well, I know so much now. I can be an agony uncle. So it started as a light-hearted agony uncle, but as it turns out, people sent in real problems. And then we started interviewing different people, sort of people on anxiety or health or anything like that. And then we moved it into talking to celebrity, and basically the way we do it is anyone who interests us we'll ask to come on. But it turns out that a lot of people are analysing life, and so there's all these fantastic conversations we have on here. I think it transpires that I set this podcast up, really, my subconscious was because I wanted to explore all these avenues with...
Oh, okay, so I didn't know that, and that is fascinating, Tim, as ever, talking to you. So it's so topical, this, because last night I was being interviewed by a guy from Engineering and Technology magazine, who I've known for years. He's an ex-Russian defector journalist, and very... he left under, was it Gorbachev or something like that, I think, maybe just before Gorbachev. And he came to this country, ambitious, very bright, wrote books, and, proper journalist. And he had a massive heart attack and very nearly died in, bypass surgery and cow valves inserted and all that a few years ago, I suppose under all the pressure. And I saw him last night. He came to our office, and I thought, you look amazing. You look so well. He goes, yeah, I've learned to meditate.
Yeah.
What? He said, I'll become a Buddhist. I mean, it was so improbable. But there's two things that happen. One is people start to look better, and they're more easy in their skin. And also, you're able to talk about all sorts of things that you can't talk to the average hedgie, or corporate lawyer, because they don't know about this. And I don't know, and actually nor does he, how we got to be that old without having a working philosophy of life. And this is a new thing because, so I was born in 1951, all the way through the 50s, the philosophy was, we won the war, we're best, Britain's amazing. The fact there was nothing to eat, no fruit, no sweets, it's just minced cabbage and, national health powdered milk. And then the 60s, we had the cult of being young and the Summer of Love and the Beatles and Liverpool, and Britain was still the best thing, And even the 70s, punk rock, the Face magazine, there was still, to be in the culture, to be young in the 70s was the most exciting thing. And then the 80s, we had the Big Bang in the city, and there was money's God, what you need is a better car. If you've got a Toyota MR2 or a Porsche, you're winning. And it's all started to crumble, hasn't it? It's like
has that gone away? Because I think that's what we're hanging on to, and that's where people like myself and probably you and everybody else is questioning life now, because it's all about finances and what we've got, and it's all being shoved at us. And we had Will Storr on, who wrote a great book called Selfie, all about the self-esteem movement, which happened in the 80s. You're better than everyone else. You're brilliant. And I think as you say, it's crumbling now, that whole philosophy.
Well, it goes back to the I am that thing, is like, the question of who you are. If you know who you are, let's hear it. But actually, it's sort of an illusion that we are separate in a way. Obviously, we are. It's clearly your head is not the same as mine. They're two isolated coconuts separated by 6 feet of breakfast bar. But underneath it, you'll see this thing when you're, what they say, in the zone, which is the thing that athletes get.
Yes.
When Seb Coe won the 1,500 meters at the Olympics, he had an out-of-body experience, and he was suddenly at the top of the bleachers, looking down at himself running around. You see it with when a cricketer goes out to the crease and they cannot miss. They keep scoring boundaries. You have it if you know how to draw, that you're so absorbed that 3 hours later you've forgotten who you are. And there's this really odd paradox that you are most yourself when you're not there. When you're so interested in what the other person is saying, you stop worrying about, oh gosh, I've got a meeting later and my leg hurts and all that stuff. So there are really these two personalities living in the same space. There's the little guy in your head who wangs on about with regrets and worries and ambition and, all those things. And there's what they sometimes call the true self, which is this thing which is connected, which enables, for example, my son Harry's a songwriter. He doesn't really write the songs. he just sits, and one day, there's one. I think Noel Gallagher's talked about this on Desert Island Discs, that he thinks there's a little man with a bucket in the sky that just pours it down into his head, you know?
Yeah.
Songwriters all have that experience, the good ones. They all have a sense of channeling in a strange way.
Has that happened with your career in TV as well? With the ideas?
When you get a big idea, so it happened to me in the late 90s. At that time, I was a commercials director and a gun for hire, make ads about anything, went all over the world. And I thought, I'm going to write a novel now. I need to do something a bit proper, a bit harder. And I was just sitting down to write, literally with my pen in my hand, and the top of my head opened like a boiled egg, like a hinge, and into it poured this idea. It's QI. It stands for quite interesting. It's like IQ backwards. It's another way of thinking. It's intuitive rather than intellectual. It means qi. QI means qi, the life force in Chinese. I just started reading philosophy at the time.
Right.
And it could be anything. It could be, it's a way of making anything in the universe interesting. It could be a documentary series. It could be a series of shops. It could be a university course, that kind of stuff. And it took me 3 hours to write this down. It was like automatic writing. I didn't think about it. It just poured out like this. As what they sometimes call an epiphany, you know, that's something from outside yourself arrives. And it's a very key thing that these are not actually difficult ideas, and they're not complicated, and they are, if you like, anecdotal rather than scientific. We all know them to be so. And you have to ask the question, ask any scientist, where do ideas come from? Nobody knows. Edison used to say, ideas come from space, you know? An idea occurs to you, literally. It occurs to you like you bump into a person in the street. Oh, hello, this is a strange thing. When we find that out, when we find out where ideas come from, then we'll probably know the secret of everything. But so far, it's eluding us.
Subconscious somewhere is forcing.
Well, I don't think it is a subconscious.
Don't you?
So if I must say, sorry, I didn't
really?
interrupt.
No, that's fine. I just think I started this podcast because of the subconscious wanted to examine these things.
Well, all right. In the sense, it comes from, it's an external thing. So subconscious, we don't know what the subconscious is. So if you can either think it like the Matmos, do you remember in Barbarella, the great sort of pool of evil below the city? So this is the pool of consciousness below you, and you stick your standpipe into the aquifer, as it were, and out comes, creativity. Or it could be the superconscious. It comes from the sky. And you'll see this with, again, these were more religious times back in the 18th century, but Mozart used to say, I've never written a note, I just listen to God. And Bach used to say, I've never composed any, God writes the tunes, I play the notes. And you see this, the brighter people are and the more experienced they are, the more they accept this. The really, really great songwriters always refuse to take credit, apart from the polishing. They'll all say, it took me 30 seconds or 4 minutes to write it,
Before we move on to TV, which I want to talk about to you in media, how are you dealing with the aging process and the fact that we are coming close to death? Because I've only just really started analysing it since losing my hair and
Tell me about it.
Yeah, the wrinkles around my eyes, and so I've started analysing it a lot because I'd like to say I love it, and then there's bits of me which does and bits of me which doesn't, and I'm thinking about it a lot at the moment. Have you thoughts on it?
Well, again, everything's dualistic. I think everything's paradoxical, and you can entertain both ideas. Just to show, my reading of philosophy went along absolutely hand in hand with big science. In fact, it started with physics, and I came to philosophy through physics, because if you want to understand physics, you need a little bit of maths, and then you eventually come across Pythagoras, who, of course, was not just a mathematician and a musician, but also an amazing top-flight philosopher. So that's how I got into it. I had this crisis, so I wanted to know what the matter was, what was wrong with me, and what was the point of being alive. Was there any point in it? And so I thought, first of all, I have to understand what's stuff made of, atoms. And what are atoms made of? I always thought they were everything's made of atoms, because atoms are made of subatoms, of electrons, inside the nucleus are quarks and all that kind of stuff. Well, none of which I knew at 40. I had no idea. Most people don't know the difference between an atom and a molecule, or a planet and a star. Why should they?
No, I don't.
I didn't. Yeah. So this, the philosophy thing, it's scientific as well as intuitive. So Niels Bohr, who's the guy who basically invented quantum mechanics, on which everything depends now scientifically, like a third of the economy is based on quantum mechanics. It's the weirdest stuff, how things actually work subatomically. But without it, there'd be no computers, no computerized cars, no DVD players, and so on. So we know it works. And he used to say, Niels Bohr, Danish scientist, used to say, the opposite of a trivial truth is obviously false, and the opposite of a great truth is also true. So you can, and often do, in fact, hold two contradictory views in your head, and I think that's about aging, and I'm exactly the same as you. I was actually chairing the precursor of Have I Got News for You? I was, successful, happy, young dad in my early 40s, I suppose, and I was shooting ads and all that, and I was asked to be on a thing called John Lloyd's Newsround, which was the pilot for Have I Got News for You? And so I went on this. I'd never been in television makeup before. I wasn't a telly guy, and as I sat in makeup, the makeup girl said, "Oh, you're losing your hair." Well, this is like the opportunity of my life to go out in front of an audience of 500 people and present a new series that would last for 25 years, and you've just told me that I'm basically useless and virtually dead. So I wasn't very good, and I quit after the pilot. But
do you think that was one of the reasons?
Definitely, yeah. I'm sorry, I can't even remember her name, so
wow.
We know who you are.
Really? So you sat there and that was enough to knock you off your perch?
Because, for a man, when you do get used to it, actually, and you just think, well, I've got all I can still see, I can walk, I haven't got kidney disease, I haven't died of, drugs or cancer or something. So there's lots to look forward to. And this is the root thing of all these philosophies is think of what you have, not what you don't have.
Right, okay.
There's always somebody worse off than you. In fact, someone worse off is a character in the novel I haven't written yet. Someone worse off, he's the person who's worse off than everybody.
Okay.
But you've got to have these two things. Like you have to accept what... Okay, here's another very cool thing about how to think in philosophical terms. There's a guy, a Sufi sage, who said, all wisdom can be stated in two lines. What is done to you, allow it to be done. What you must do for yourself, make sure you do it. So you have to divide everything in life into the things that cannot be changed and can't be fixed, and you've got to accept. That's losing your hair. Mm-hmm. And the other stuff that can be fixed and you can do something about. You're overweight, you can go for a run, eat less pies,
Yeah.
And the other thing is, you're alive, Tim. Look, you're in a fantastically nice kitchen and a lovely house and a lovely road with people around you who really like and respect you. You've got so much. Hair is of no account. And when you look at another guy who doesn't have much hair, do you go, he's contemptible. I don't speak to anyone who hasn't got long flowing locks. You don't think about it. And also the great thing is, this is a great tip, women don't give two hoots about a man being bald or not. Most normal women, they don't mind.
Right. So what's really interesting about that, for the regular listeners of this podcast will know that on one of the early podcasts, I'd booked myself in for a hair transplant, showbiz hair transplant, as I like to call it. So I'm actually, Mark came with me and we took a little tape recorder thing. So we're taping me outside, I'm about to go in for my hair transplant. I sit in the chair, I've gone really hot, and I'm like, this is not right. Why am I doing this? The guy says to me, why are you looking so nervous and so frustrated, and why are you worried about this? I'm about to change your life. And I hated that sentence. I'm about to change your life. So I said, I'm going to get up and go for a walk. I got up and go for a walk. And thankfully, Mark was there, and Mark's a caring person, and went, I don't think you should be doing this. And I thought I shouldn't be doing this. And we just laughed about it. I went, I'm not doing it. Keep the deposit. And I ran off down the street.
Oh, my God. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it is. But it was like that moment, because of our TV career. So it's really interesting you say that. I realized that when your hair starts going, you're not perceived as the younger guy you are. You have to change yourself around a bit. And it became quite a big issue in my life, a bit like you said
Yes,
it was
of
for
course it
you.
was.
And you start questioning your worth on television.
Yes. You're in a what they call a phase transition, where, you know, phase transition is a scientific idea. When a thing goes from gas to liquid or solid to liquid or whatever, it's in a phase transition. It's very violent. You know, when ice starts to melt, the first thing it does is crack with a thunderclap.
Yeah.
So this is the thing, it's breaking you open to start again. And if you're lucky and you don't kill yourself or, you know, run away with somebody unsuitable, you have a whole other different way of looking at life, which is equally rewarding. I would argue more rewarding than the business of, oh, I've got nice hair, I'm very pretty, you know, which we, believe it or not, we've all been there, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a shock, but I really, really respect you for doing that, because at the end of the day, you can go and have your face fixed and all that kind of thing, but you look awfully well on it, I must say. You really
thank
do.
you. Yeah, I think it's about just coming to terms with who you are and moving into that process, I think. But
also ultimately, you are not your haircut. If that's the best you've got, and who are you?
Yeah.
This Indian sage spent 14 years considering. I am my haircut. I'm really sorry for that. And I think you can see that when people are obsessed about that. Or I am my wife. You know, my wife is not young and beautiful enough.
Well, our industry's rife with it all, isn't it? And now they're offering up so many different forms of plastic surgery and cosmetic surgery and whatever else. It's tough, and I think it's really tough on the women in the TV industry, because they're the ones who get judged more than the men. They really do.
But there's a thing again. When I had this insight about QI that I was talking about earlier, we lived in a teeny-weeny little cottage in Oxfordshire. We moved out of London. We were trying to look for a house to live in the country. In the meantime, we had this little cottage, so we went there. And I was sitting there doing that. And before then, we'd been 30-something Fulhamites, you know. You don't have any idea who the neighbours are. They're probably, you know, don't have nearly as nice a car as you. Yeah. Certainly don't speak to them. You go to see your celebrity friends and so on, all that kind of stuff. You live in a little village in the middle of nowhere, and your kids go to sleep above the village shop. You get to know a whole different demographic. You see babies for the first time all the time, apart from your own, you know. You see very old people. And when you come from that Fulham life, you know, going out to dinner, a nanny, all that stuff, and then you're in a village on your own, you see old people. Your first reaction, mine was, ugh.
Oh, no.
Oh, blimey, look at those. But of course, you only have to talk to them for 3 minutes. You forget how old they are, because they're a person. You're listening to the inside of the person. You become very close to these people. And of course, I think, how did I get there? Because as a child, my granny, my mum's mum, was literally my favourite person in the world. And she was immensely old. She died at 108. So it's these prejudices that clog up your life. You know, I don't like this. I don't do that. I don't eat this kind of food. It's terrible. And being free of all those prejudices, and I love old ladies. There's nothing, because inside they're a young lady, aren't they? Of course they are.
Yeah. So have I got news for you? Do you have regrets about not staying on that show then?
No, I thought Angus particularly he was born to do the job, and, you know, before his, you know, what happened to him, you know, you just think he's masterly. I could never do that. And actually, you know, I'd started the news quiz on which it was based in the 70s, and I felt I was slightly repeating myself. I like to do new things. I like to, you know, keep moving, and I think it's a bit like being sacked from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which you probably have heard about. At the time, it was very painful. You know, Douglas Adams, my best friend, but what a joy. Imagine being, what's the name of that guy who writes with Douglas Adams? The guy who's a bit shorter, the bald guy. What's his, I can't remember. Anyway, Douglas is a genius, but apparently has this bloke who hangs around him and gets paid to do his typing. Imagine doing that for a whole life. I couldn't have borne it. And so, as a direct result of being sacked, and I sometimes say one of my mantras is disaster is a gift. You look back on your life and you think what looked at the time like a disaster turns out, thank goodness I didn't marry that person, take that job, you know.
Why were you sacked?
Because the express reason was I think it's better when I did it on my own. I don't agree with that, and the probably rather, why should I share my credit with somebody else? And right, I think ultimately in the long term that is correct, but Douglas found writing very difficult, except with me. We wrote very fast and we enjoyed ourselves. We laughed a lot. It was very free of pressure. Had equally good ideas, but Douglas wanted, the full credit. And as a result, he spent the rest of his life suffering, trying to crank out these books and, video games and all the other things he did.
I suppose ego's, I don't know the story well enough or Douglas well enough, but I suppose ego's a terrible thing sometimes. It can destroy your life if you're...
Well, for example, going back to the core theme, we use the word ego lightly every day. Oh, that person's got a big ego.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a big ego. That's the voice in your head that runs your life day to day, that tells you what to do. There's consciousness is a very interesting thing. And there was a brilliant book written in, I think, the early 70s called The Origin of... It's called something, The Origin of Consciousness in the Bicameral Mind.
Right.
By a guy called Julian Jaynes. And his consciousness studies led him to believe that the ancient Greeks, particularly, and the Romans to an extent, when they heard that voice in their head, like I can hear yours saying, Tim, get this guy on with it. He's waffling now. He's waffling on about some book he can't remember. I'm just going to have a quick look at my phone while he catches his breath.
I'm going to read something to you in a minute.
But the voice in your head, the Greeks believed that was the god.
Right.
The god said, go and kill that man in battle. And so they never took responsibility morally for their actions. They believed that the voice that we all hear, people make tactless jokes about schizophrenics hearing voices in their head. Everybody who thinks hears a voice in their head. It's just not, audible, as it were. But the thought process is what that is.
Yeah.
And that's the ego, and that's the thing that needs to be addressed and talked to, because it's where all the sort of all the action as well, all the dynamism comes from that, but also most of the negative things.
Yeah, I was going to give you a bit of an ego trip actually, because I know someone who works with you, and I texted her the other day to say, hey, I've got John Lloyd coming on the podcast. That's exciting. What do you think about him? Tell me about him. And her comments were just one after the other. He's great, super encouraging, works hard, good mentor, inspiring. Really, he's done so much amazing stuff. And that was it. And I just thought that's really sweet that she thinks that about you, because we work in the TV industry where, I don't know, I think a lot of people can be quite giving, but there's a lot of people protecting their roles, their art, isn't there?
Yes.
This is my bit. This is I remember when I worked at Soccer M, I used to say to everybody, hey, if you come up with an idea, work it through. You can edit it. You can do whatever you want. Come up with that's our business, ideas. And then when I went back into proper TV on terrestrial channels, suddenly I realised everyone had a role, and you weren't allowed to step outside your role because that was somebody else's role. And there's I've worked 10 years to become this. You then can't come along with an idea. It's kind of a strange thing. It's all about ideas. And as I understand it, at QI, that's what you've created, a team of people. Everyone can come up with the quite interesting facts. Is that true?
It is. It's what they call a flat hierarchy in business, which is everybody's an equal, and people are not only encouraged to disagree with me or the producer, but they have to be forced, because if you do well in life, at school and university, obedience is the thing. And it was very difficult when I came back into television in the early noughties, because the tradition in which I'm trained is, I don't care if you're the Director General. If you're a producer at the BBC, you're entitled to say what you think. Yeah. And you are encouraged to, because how will we get on if we're only using half the opinions? One of my favourite things is an acronym in business now called a Hippo. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's everyone in every meeting in most businesses is waiting for a Hippo to come along, okay? And a Hippo stands for higher paid person's opinion. So everyone is going... they're not committing themselves until the boss says, I know what we should do. Oh, yes, sir, that's a... Oh, yes. Oh, thank you so much, what a great idea.
Brilliant.
And so basically you're wasting the time of 20 people, and the boss is also wasting their time because they've got a resource there.
Yeah.
20 minds are bound to be better than one, and that's the joy of QI. Sometimes it's quite argumentative, never rude, I think, but passionately argued things. And it results in really interesting, counterintuitive, special ideas. And it's the way I was trained at the BBC when I was a kid producer at 22 is, so what do I do, sir, as a producer? I don't really know what they do. Well, go off and make some things you like to listen to, Lloyd. Go on, push off. Well, what, is that the rule? That's it, yes, go on, do something pleasant and enjoyable. So that's how I learned, really.
Yeah.
But you learn on your own because there's too much concern about sending people on training courses and things. I mean, children learn languages all over the world just by listening. They don't have to be taught a language. It's innate. Everybody wants to learn. Everybody is naturally curious. So if you leave them alone, you'd be amazed what people can do. If you tell everybody what to do every day, and because you're in charge, your opinion's obviously worth more than somebody 20 years younger than you, all you'll have is your opinion to live with. And that probably will also be controlled by the little person in your head that's saying, you're marvellous. You're absolutely marvellous. You're head of everything.
How many successes have you had? Has everything been a success you've touched? Or have you had any?
Come on.
Have you had many failures?
Hundreds.
Have you?
Many more failures than successes.
Really? That's what.
Well, I've been fired from 6, 7 movies, something like that. Let's list the things I've been fired. Mr. Bean, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I spent 1993 trying to start a radio station called Radio Barking. It was the second best idea I've had, apart from QI. The world's first 24-hour comedy radio station, set in Barking, in a pub. We had 100 comedians signed up. We had £4 million in cash. We had a schedule that I wrote with Douglas Adams and Chris Donald, who started Viz, that looked like the Radio Times. It was absolutely marvellous.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't give us a license, because you had to have a radio license, FM license for London. And I said, why won't you give us a license? He said, well, this is the best application for a radio station I have ever seen. But what's the guarantee you could run a radio station because of it? So, well, the other people can't even write the brochure. We can at least do that. And the other thing he said was, if it's such a great idea, why has it never been done before? And you say, well, what, like penicillin or the laser?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
And so that was actually the year I had my crisis, because I thought, this is insane. I've knocked myself out trying to do this. It was very, very difficult to do. I've got the best people in the country, and some guy I've never heard of won't give us a chance. And I think they gave the franchise to a bunch called London Country Radio, which lasted 3 months.
I did a project called Channel B, which was internet TV stuff. It was, I hate this, say this way before its time sort of thing, but we were trying to make content for online, which had been quite viral now and all that. So actually some of them are still viral now, some of the content we made. But I had a really bad breakdown after that, because I just convinced everyone this was the future and I'd seen it. And then when it just died, and then the people who were funding it said, you can buy it off me for £1, and I'm like, well, I don't want it. Why am I going to fund it? And then when it all closed down, I've really struggled with it, the whole concept of that failure. So I'd put so much of myself into it, a bit like the radio thing you said there.
Well, you've got to twist that on its head and think, what can I learn from this?
Yeah,
I mean, for example, just to go back to the spooky for a minute. So reincarnation, I don't know whether I believe it or not, but Buddhism is a really interesting thing because it's so logical. And we don't know whether it's true or not, but as a set of logical precepts and ways to be, it definitely works. For example, anyone who's done yoga with any seriousness or meditated with any seriousness knows that it works. Every scientific test that's ever been done on yoga or meditation proves that people, they're healthier, they're happier, all that. There's just no question about it. It's not woo-woo stuff.
Yeah.
It's not astrology or, stuff like that. It's actually physically, we don't know why it works, but it does. So Buddhism works and it's logical, and they believe in reincarnation. You're going round and round in a sort of karma-driven cycle. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's like a lot of philosophy, it's a very good metaphor for a way to live. So if you've got kids, I would recommend anyone who becomes a parent, rather than treating the children like a sort of necessary inconvenience, like a sort of slightly loud farting dwarf or something. I shouldn't say that. A slightly loud farting person of disadvantaged stature. You behave as if the children have been sent to teach you something, not the other way round. Because you start to make progress as a parent when you start to listen rather than tell. You listen to what they say. Every child under 5 is a genius. They ask all the big questions, all the questions that philosophers have asked. They're also given the chance, potentially very nice. They're not necessarily little bastards. And they are as intelligent as you. They just have less experience and they're not as tall. But in every other way, they are a proper person. And when you start listening, you start learning something. And when you get angry with a child, ask yourself, why am I so angry about somebody spilling their Rice Krispies? What does this mean? So you stand a chance, if you treat the kids like grown-ups, as it were, of learning something about yourself. And that's what I believe having children is about the grown-ups, so-called, actually growing up.
I listened to a Buddhist recently discussing on a podcast, and they were saying, how do we do our Zen training? He said, the best way of doing Zen training, forget taking yourself to a mountain and doing meditation. Anyone can do that. Go out in rush hour. He goes, then you can start your Zen training if you're staying calm in rush hour. And then he said, and if you really want to go to the next level, have a baby. That is your perfect Zen training.
So brilliant. So I'll bounce you back a story about this. So the guy who is our yoga teacher is a wonderful guy called Neville. And he saved my son's school career by teaching. He was very ADHD, kind of jumpy teenager, and he couldn't sit still. Neville taught him to meditate and to do simple yoga, which got him through his A-levels. Okay. So we know that works. And so we've known Neville now, that must be nearly 15 years, one way or another, I suppose. And Neville, as the kind of guy who spent years in a Tibetan monastery, Oxford boy, slightly naughty, was interested in this stuff you've become interested in, went to Tibet, learned the real stuff, lived for 3 months in a cave on his own, all that. So he's lived the dream, if you like that kind of thing. So he's the most charming, easygoing, funny, well-looking guy. He's just terrific. And then he got married to Teresa, who's also delightful and also meditates and does yoga. And they had 2 kids. She was advised not to, because she'd been ill, but she had these 2 lovely kids. And Neville, he's still the greatest person in the world, but he said, "Oh, John, now I see what you're on about. It's so hard. It's so hard. It's hanging by a thread, even for somebody who's virtually a guru in his own right,
Life's
Trying
tough.
to deal with 2 small kids is very, very hard."
Life's tough, yeah. It was really tough doing that. The thing I took from Buddhism when I've studied it, not that I've studied it in much detail, but I like it. And the thing I like is their non-attachment. And that's the one thing that I felt has been the biggest change in my life since I've had my sort of breakdowns and depression is I was very attached to being a TV presenter. I thought it really defined me. And having spent a lot of time working in sport, I could see even more with them because they've got such a short shelf life. And the misery sports people go through is phenomenal. The highs they attain is unbelievable. So, I don't know, you score the winning drop kick in the World Cup, Johnny Wilkinson, or you score a goal or something, the highs are amazingly high. But when you retire, the new young kids come along. No one wants you anymore. And you're defined as that. Now, I'm defined as a TV presenter, and I think that's why the hair transplant thing was happening. What if I lose that? I lose who I am. And the realization that that's not what I am, I'm still me, is a fantastic thing. And I think I learned that from the Buddhist philosophy of non-attachment.
Well, again, if you haven't come across these things, they're almost baffling. I came across non-attachment through a Chinese philosopher called Chuang Tzu, who was kind of a contemporary of Confucius. And if Confucius is the state philosopher, the Aristotle of ancient China, as it were, revered by everybody and all that, Chuang Tzu was the nutcase, the rebel. He was the Socrates, scruffy, naughty, funny, all that kind of stuff. And I came across a saying of his, which is, Do not like, do not dislike, all will then be clear. And it has the ring of truth. I think that's poetic, but I have no idea what it means. I thought, if you didn't like things or not like them, how would you know what you thought about anything? And the attachment thing, and I've never said this to anyone, Tim, I've never even thought it, is my problem was I was attached to my work. I thought I was my work.
Yeah.
So all these things, the list of, hit shows I've been happy to be part of, that was all I thought I was. And when I collapsed, I said, I don't know who I am. If you take the shows away, I gave up work for 3 months to find out who I was, and I was completely empty, like an empty bucket. I wandered up and down the Fulham Road thinking, I've got to get a job as a waiter, anything, a car park attendant, just because to fill this hole.
Yeah.
Because if there are no programs, if I'm not the guy who produced Blackadder, I'm nobody. And that's a horrific experience. And you realize that so much of achievement and, all the who's who entries and the fancy cars and the kitchen extensions is, if that's all you aren't anybody really. And it's the same with sportsmen. You can only feel compassion for people who have their career taken away, but you are not your rugby playing ability. You're my dad or the person I love more than anyone else in the world. That's the important thing. What do you need really apart from 3 friends and enough money to go to the pub? I don't think.
Oh, that's a great philosophy. I do like that. That's really good. Right, let's get back to TV. I love this conversation, by the way. I think it's fantastic. But let's go back to this book you've written, 2024 Facts. Well, I say you've all written as a team. How do you go about putting all these facts together? How do you go about putting the facts together for QI?
Well, QI was a philosophy. It was my philosophy of how to be before it was a program. It arose out of my midlife crisis. Are there ways that you can think and be? And one of them is that everything in the universe, without exception, is interesting if looked at closely enough for long enough or from the right angle. Okay, so that's our mantra, as I'm sure you know. And it's also a very Zen thing. One of the key ideas of Zen is attention. Pay attention. Pay complete attention, absolute attention to everything all the time. Attention, 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 attention. Now, that right now. Here, now, pay attention. That's all you have to do. If you're really paying attention, you're always in the moment. And if you're always in the present, you're always properly alive.
Yeah.
And that's very much how a QI researcher works, is that I was in the office yesterday. The silence in that office is extraordinary. People are so absorbed in what they're doing. They're off researching the Mabutu, the pygmies of Central Africa, or they're doing raspberries, or we're doing the Q series. They're trying to find nouns that begin with Q, very difficult. It's so quiet. And so what they're doing is they're scanning books, internet things, magazines, could be anything, podcasts, documentaries. They're scanning everything, looking for the nuggets of interestingness. And if you do this every day, which I do, I get about 30 news feeds every day, and I'm looking for really standout pieces of information I didn't know yesterday. Everybody's learning all the time. The one I found this morning was the first patent for in-ear headphones was granted in, guess which year?
1960 something.
1891.
Wow.
It was devised for telephonists when the telephone first came in.
Right, okay.
And you just think, it's just so lovely, isn't it? It's so not what you think. Anyway, so everybody in the office does it all the time. And so it's multiple sources and cross-referenced and so on, because each time you find another reference, you find out there's a better bit of information. And then it's collated with
Okay, well, how? Go on. Sorry,
No.
I was just going to say, how do you make sure they're actual facts?
Well,
you're saying cross-referencing them.
We are very, very careful about accuracy, but there's a point at which, Big Bang. It's only a theory.
I like at the beginning of the book how you say that you can actually search them. So every you can look it up online, every fact, and see where the source of the information comes from.
And you can make up your own mind, which is that's a core precept of Buddhism, as you know.
Brilliant.
Don't believe what you're told. Go with your own research and your own interestingness.
So I put this book up and I thought I'll find a couple of interesting facts. You cannot stop. So I just started, and I had to stop because I just picked up randomly 26 tons of clothing abandoned each year at the start of the Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
Before he became a billionaire, Roman Abramovich ran a company that made plastic ducks. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. Birds in cages hop in the direction they would migrate if they could. You just can't stop. It is brilliant. You know, you just keep going. Why 10,000? Because you've got up to 10,000. Why are you stopping at 10,000?
Well, again, going back to philosophy, in one of the great books of human history is called the Tao Te Ching, which is the Taoist, as it were, Bible, which is about everything that is the Tao, the way, the path. And it talks about the Tao became one, the one became two, and the two became all things. And in Chinese philosophy, 10,000 things, the 10,000 things, is the sum of everything. It's a metaphor for the totality of everything that can be known. So it's a natural place to stop. And again, we've done 7 of these books. They make 10,000 facts in total. And we're going to bring out a box set for Christmas. If you're a real QI nut, you can get that. It's a round number, and we like to move on and not get stuck on a format. And that's why the number 2024, it actually adds up. It makes the sum total 10,000.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we'll change our mind, but I don't think so.
And the when you came up with the concept, when it ended up as the television show, Stephen Fry was such a great booking for it, wasn't he? But you had to create the atmosphere, the right atmosphere. I always think with TV shows, it's about what atmosphere you're creating there.
So right. That's why you make such good television, because you understand it's the feeling you get of it. It's not about the format. It doesn't matter how many desks there are or how many, where it's shot. It's the people and the mood that makes it.
It's when you're looking at it, you feel part of it, and you want to be there in the studio, and you're enjoying their company. Sandy Toksvig has absolutely been brilliant as well, hasn't she?
Yeah, she has. Wonderful.
What a fantastic replacement. I mean, it's just seamlessly gone on.
I know. It's lovely, and it's so wonderful because there's no bad blood. It was Stephen's decision.
Yeah.
I only wanted Sandy, nobody else. I didn't think anyone else could do it to anything like the degree. She loves it, and Stephen's got a new life. But going back to the thing, disaster is a gift, okay? We're going to make the pilot for Talkback. I got this all set up. I knew where I could find the material. I wrote it myself, the script, and did all the research. 2 team captains, Alan Davis, captain of the Dunderhead side, the people who got no level of metal work and spent the school looking out the window and playing football. And the clever team, captained by Stephen Fry and all the smart asses, John Sessions and Clive Anderson and so on. And that's the thing. QI is the Alan team, the intuitive, inspirational thinking. IQ, the intellectual people who read all the books, is the other side. And that's the competition. In the middle, nice Mr. Michael Palin. Neutral, kind, amusing, doesn't claim to know any of the facts, but says on the card, the answer's pigeons, not albatrosses. That was the format.
Yeah.
So I went to see Mike, I've known for years and years, took him out to lunch, said, Mike, you've done comedy, you're the best. You've done travel, you're the best. This is the third thing. You're now going to change the way people are educated all over the world, and I've got the perfect format for you. And I said, I just got back from the Sahara, I'm absolutely shattered. I don't want to do it, really. I said, Mike, you have to do this. It's made for you. It's devised for you. You are the chairman of QI. He said, I can't, John. I'm really sorry. I just can't do it. So I went back to the office. I was bereft, and I went to see my young research team. I said, we screwed up. It's not going to happen. If we don't get Mike, it's not going to work. And I pulled myself together. We went out to the pub, and we all got absolutely wrecked that night. And when I woke up the next day, I rang Steve, and I said, Steve, we've had a complete disaster. Mike Palin doesn't want to do it. Would you stand in to be not captain, but to be the chairman, and I'll find somebody else the other side? And he goes, oh, no, I want to be team captain. I'm going to win every game in this. I thrash Alan Davis. He doesn't know anything. And he was really disappointed. I said, please, Stephen, we're old friends just for the pilot. Would you mind? So he said, okay, Lloyd, it's you. I'll do it. And so we start recording the pilot. Within 5 minutes, everybody in that studio could see, rather like Angus Deaton and Have I Got News, he was made to do the job. Yeah. Who else could ever have done that job? And so when we took the tape to the BBC, they said, well, we'll do it, but only if Stephen Fry is the chairman.
Yeah.
And of course, by that time, he thought, actually, I quite like this. I'm quite good at this. But it is marvellous. So disaster is a gift. You know, if it hadn't been for Mike saying no, we'd have never have thought of Stephen.
But was it always the way that the panelists were all going to sort of support each other? That's what I like about it. Was sort of one side of the team comes up, one side comes up with a joke, the other ones keep going with it. They're not against each other, which seems on so many. I think that's why
they're no team captains.
Yeah,
actually, why it works better.
Because panel shows are generally people attacking each other. Yeah. And this is one where they're sort of supporting each other. It's such a
the thing is,
feeling.
You'll know this. I mean, nothing great is created by accident. Actually, doing things well and making them, all the ideas I've ever done. Because that's such an obvious idea. Anyone could have had that idea. So when I didn't actually have the idea for Spitting Image, but it's not one person's idea. Spitting Image is a combination of 10, 20 million ideas, all of which go towards the core of it. But there are two philosophical ideas which were at QI right from the start, and this comes from philosophy as well, which is one is don't patronize the audience. The audience are just as clever as you. Many carpenters, plumbers, and even street sweepers have got IQs of over 150. They just weren't very good at the school stuff. Or they've fallen on hard times, or they didn't, their family life wasn't very good. It is the thing we used to hold dear at the BBC. The audience are just as intelligent as you. Don't talk down to them. Talk up to them. They'll come to your level. Just explain it properly. So that's the first thing is, so we don't talk down to them. And the other thing is warmth. That's something I think is missing, Yourself aside, and obviously many other examples. It's one of the reasons Bake Off is so popular.
Yeah.
It's warm. It's kindly, And warmth is a thing that's slightly drained out of television in the last 20 years, and particularly in game shows, which are very competitive, and, everyone's got to win. You've got to, if you ask people what it's like going on most panel games, they come off sweating and shredded. QI, Bill Bailey will come off the show, John, this is the best show, and give me a hug. This is the most fun you can have in front of a camera. As you know, it's not all fun in front of cameras. It can be stressful and tiring, and you need people to be on your side and support you.
The world's become very competitive. I think it has been for a long time, but TV and media has become very competitive. Everything you do now is someone's got to win something. It seems that way, and sadly, I think that's made its way into our schooling. I don't want to get involved in talking about schools again. I talk about it too much, but where schools are in competition with each other on a ladder, and then the pupils are in.
The thing is, it's something that happens that people, I think broadcasters, educators, they've forgotten what we're doing it for. We're not broadcasting to people so that we can be richer than the producer in the next office, or so that we can win more awards. We're doing it because it's of itself worth doing. It is worth educating children so that they will become rounded, interested, useful human beings, not so that they can get a degree which may be meaningless.
Yeah.
Also, the school can be better than the one next door. That's not education. That's something else.
I often think that people forget the reason why people are on doing it. I mean, I always say we're on TV, not for the people. People on TV often make TV for other people in TV, not for the audience. Yeah. We see that happen a lot. And I think the football industry is the amazing one, where they've forgotten that there's people who are paying money to come in and watch them. So if you're parking the bus, say, for instance, you're not you're supposed to be entertaining those people. Whether you lose or not is irrelevant. You're supposed to be entertaining. You're not. And people, they always talk about winning ugly. I'm like, but that's not the idea. That's not what anybody bought into when they decided to do professional leagues. Why are we doing that? So, yeah, it's a win at all costs. It seems to be the culture.
No, I do agree, and as part of the sort of theme just now, it's like. It's what happened to me is if winning is what you stand for and then you stop winning, it's horrible. And that's really what happened to me in my crisis. 2 or 3 things happened in the same 2 or 3 months where I was completely wrongly fired or failed to get something to happen. It was a new experience for me. I'd been used to basically working very hard, doing it well and being rewarded for it. And I did the same thing. I worked very hard, I did it very well, and they didn't want it. And it happened a second time, then a third time. It's like, and there's the knockout blow. And I thought, what's gone wrong? This is like, everything I do is marvellous.
Yeah.
You have it's a massive ego attack, really, of just thinking, well, I've been right so many times, I must be right now. And of course I was right, Tim.
Needless to say. What happened to Spitting Image? Why did that get taken off?
Well, 2014 was the 30th anniversary of the start in '84. So I did some radio tours with Roger Law, the great puppet maker and artist and ceramicist, and the other half of Fluck and Law. And we were asked that question on the radio. I forget now who it was. Somebody quite eminent. So why did it stop? And Roger said, because it wasn't funny anymore. I said, well, perhaps not as exciting as it was at the beginning, Roger, but it must have been. No, he said it wasn't funny. Stopped being funny. And I looked it up. You can see the last ever Spitting Image online now, if you look it up on Google, on YouTube. And bizarrely, it isn't funny at all. There's two slightly half... It's technically amazing. There's hundreds of puppets all dancing around, and the voices are very good. It's not funny. Somehow it lost its mojo, like we're saying is, when we started Spitting Image, we were trying to change the world. It was a mission, We wanted to absolutely... It was nothing to do with being successful. We never thought we'd be successful. We never thought we'd get 15 million viewers every Sunday night. We were astonished when we did. Well, I thought we were radical. What's happened? But we really, really wanted to change the way things were done, to air issues and all that kind of thing. And that was why it was so good, because people weren't, and we were absolutely speaking to the people, to not a demographic, not a bunch of, clever clogs and private eye readers, it's everyone. And I told this story before, you may have heard it, so you can cut it out if you want, but it was very, very long hours. I worked 7 days a week for 3 months at a time. And I came back from Birmingham, where we used to record it in the studio, to go to Limehouse, where we'd made the puppets. And it was late at night. The train got into King's Cross at 1 a.m, and I'd fallen asleep. And I woke up to an empty train parked in the station, and there were these two, Cockney biddies, with the mops and buckets clanking around, swear word alert. And one said, so she said, "Do you see that Spitting Images on the telly the other night?" And the other one says, "Oh yeah," she said, "I love that programme. I hate the fucking Queen." And I thought, whoa, this is what I've done, And one of the things that television forgets to do, it does talk to itself. It doesn't talk to other people. It's one of the things about Big Brother, for example, or you may find this weird, but I'm a big fan of The Only Way is Essex, because I grew up in Essex. Right. And I really like Essex girls. And I know it's very high octane, but shows like that and Big Brother, especially when it started, they reach people who don't feel that television is talking to them or their values at all. And if you don't do that in telly, you get what's happened now. You get the rise of populism, of people feeling, ignored and not joined up. And Spitting Image definitely got everybody. If you looked at the demographics, it's not just ABC ones, it's C2s, Ds, it's people who nobody wants Ds watching their television program. They haven't got any money.
What are Ds?
Those will be a sort of not quite a navvy, but no, a sort of skilled labour.
Right. Okay.
This may have gone out of date now, but I would say the kind of people. I was a Essex builder in my gap year, so the kind of person I was, chippy, plumber, taxi driver, maybe. So
I think that's
ordinary working class people, but not useful working class people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why Love Island might work as well.
Yes, I agree with you.
Because it's too hard to produce. I know they put a little bit of production in there to speed stuff along, but they can't put all the words in their mouths, so they're actually speaking how normal people would speak, or those sort of people would speak.
I also think, I feel strongly about this, that Mrs. Brown's Boys is very...
I love that show.
Oh, God, me too.
I tuned in by mistake one day. But do you know why I like that show? Yeah. It's they're having fun.
I know, but that's
it's why I like TV. I like watching people. Right. I like watching people have a good time.
Brendan is such a great guy. He's a sort of, I wouldn't call him a friend. I don't know him well, but we're very friendly. And here's a very interesting thing. Two things about Mrs. Brown's Boys. One is sort of box tickers can't understand why Mrs. Brown's Boys is popular. and nor can people who smart asses. They think, well, you know, the jokes are like, you know, a bit naff or it's a bit tasteless and so on. But ordinary people go, it's like what comedy used to be like in the 70s. It's a laugh. It's a
funny.
laugh.
They're laughing at
we
themselves.
break all the rules.
Yeah, they're laughing.
To hell, it's not very well lit. Who cares about the lighting?
He does a crap joke and then laughs at it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I like.
He's having fun, and it's all his family, all the people he likes. And
yeah.
it's an absolute joy. I mean, a joy.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it. And I go to my work sometimes. I go, "Did anyone see Miss Brown's Boys last night?" And they were looking at me like I'm mad sometimes. But I think I've started getting them into it. So
it's a particular. The other thing about Brendan is we had him on QI. He was marvellous. He was one of the few people that Stephen was in awe of how smart he was. And Brendan's one of the few people who can take Stephen to task and win.
Oh, brilliant.
And afterwards, we were out on the balcony having a drink, and he said, do you know why I agreed to do Mrs. Brown's Boys on television? Because actually we had a great life. We did half the year touring the stage show and half the year living in Florida in our lovely house. Right. I didn't need to do television. So, no, well, why do you do it? He said, I thought that if you saw me on television, you'd take me seriously and give me a seat on QI. Because he's a QI nut. He's got all the books.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it is, and it's a great honour, you know. And again, it's like
good,
you're speaking the whole thing about QI. These books are very easy to read. They speak to everybody. Yeah. 12-year-old can read them, no problem.
Oh, they're fantastic. Just going back to Spitting Image, how did you decide who had a puppet?
Well, again, it's something. When I was there, I'm very fierce about this. You know, BBC training goes in deep, and fairness is at the heart of what the BBC tries to do. They don't always succeed, but that's the idea. Try to be fair. Try to show the best of people. And so long and furious sometimes arguments used to take place about whether this person, as it were, deserved to be a puppet. Did they deserve to be lampooned at all? You know, had they done anything, you know, because we couldn't afford to do not nearly everybody. We had to pick and choose. So we picked people we thought would be funny about, but mainly we thought we could say something, if you like, critical about, and we tried to be on the side of the angels. And there are some, you know, famous accidents as to how who got to be a puppet. As it went on, and you got thousands of puppets. You have anyone you want. They did everybody, and I used to be a bit shocked. I stopped doing it after the first 3 years, and I think, why have they done a puppet of John Cleese? What's he done to deserve this? Well, because they've got a very good caricature and they can do the voice very well, but they're not saying anything about him. You know, at that time he was, you know, still the legendary Cleese. You know, hadn't put a foot wrong, and I didn't really approve of it. And it sounds a bit creepy to say it, but you know, it's a moral responsibility making topical satirical television. You don't do it lightly.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about that because obviously that's something you've been doing for a long time, and I've noticed in recent years we've got a culture in politics now, the soundbite culture. We've created this. I mean, Question Time now is pretty. I'm sorry about this for anyone. It's pretty unwatchable. Hey, let's discuss Brexit in 5 minutes, and let's have 6 people on a panel all saying 1.5 minutes worth of stuff about it. It's not easy to do, and there's big topics we've got going on in the world at the moment, and I watched Have I Got News For You, and I love it, but they're still picking on the politicians, and I think there needs to be some balance because the media are responsible for creating a culture where the interviewer is wanting to be a celebrity now. So you've got all the famous, you know, the Pesters and the Mars, and you know all those guys, the Kay Burleys, the Piers Morgans. They're all becoming bigger than the politicians, and no one's taking their acts to task. So we haven't got a balance anymore. So all we've got is criticism of Boris Johnson, criticism of Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott, blah blah blah. But do you know what I mean by this? We've got they're not actually allowed to say anything because they're only allowed to say sound bites, and the people who are interviewing him are trying to catch them out and make a name for themselves as well. There's something going awry with politics and TV definitely at the moment, and I'm wondering how we readdress the balance. Now, I think it normally happens with comedy, and I think that's where that has its place, and especially the sort of shows that you've done. Readdress the balance of it all, and I'm wondering whether we need a show to start saying, "Whoa, hold on, how we discussing politics at the moment? That's funny." Brexit, 8 people on a panel. How can you do that?
Well, it's like what Jordan Peterson calls binary thinking, is that it once you get into a I'm right, you're wrong kind of culture, whether Brexit or the EU or Trump's judge, whatever it is now, somehow people have to buy into one side or another. That if you're a climate change denier, you also believe in capital punishment, and if you believe in, I don't know, transgender bathrooms, then you also have to vote Labour. You think, well, then why do you necessarily have to, have the whole slate? It's one of the reasons I've never joined a union, for example, is I never belong to a political party, because there's always something I don't agree with.
No, I couldn't agree with you more.
I think most people are like that.
The Jordan Peterson thing, though, is a really good example of that. Who did he do that interview with, Mark? I can't remember. Do you remember on Channel 4? Did you see it?
That woman who tried to put him on the spot.
Yeah, I can't remember what her name is now. But if you watch that interview, what's interesting about Jordan Peterson speaking about after that is he says they think it was a success, and then they put it out on YouTube because it was originally edited. Then they put the whole full thing out on YouTube because they think the interview was a success. He said he thought it was a disaster because every point he came up with, she just took the opposing view, and that's what it. Pardon?
Cathy Newman.
Cathy Newman, and I just wonder if.
I think there probably is somebody in the hierarchy who thinks it's a success, but she doesn't, and nor do her friends. It's just she got caught in the thing. It's this binary thing, You've got to say the thing that everyone's saying, which is you're basically you're a transphobe, aren't you? And you're a anti-feminist. No. Well, you're very, very right-wing. I'm not right-wing at all. Well, so what you're saying is transgender people are wrong. No, I never said that. That's the sort of shape of it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But somebody who knows Cathy Newman said this is extraordinary because she's a very nice, proper journalist who really takes her job seriously, and she isn't that caricature, but you get into a thing, don't you? I'm sure, if we you get into an argument about Brexit, whichever way you voted, and you suddenly find yourself saying cliches.
Yes.
It's like being a parent, for example. I heard my father talking out of my own voice, out of my own lips, You dirty little boy, go to bed at once and, never come back again. Did I say that? Why did I say that? That you default to this kind of sort of monkey position, which is like really obvious. And this is what's so interesting about Jordan Peterson. He comes along and he says, I never heard anyone say that before. That's the most interesting way of approaching that thing. And yes, comedy is the solution, particularly in Britain. We used to be so good at it, laughing at ourselves.
We've got this thing called podcast, which you're on now, long form. I've been going for over an hour now. And are you all right with time, by the way? Yeah. So we're going for over an hour now, and people will be thoroughly enjoying this, going, wow, this is really interesting. You're talking about philosophy and television and media. But we've created environment for politics, which people are supposed to be, in 3 minutes discuss Brexit. It's ludicrous now. We've got
because they don't discuss it. What they do is they default to a set of, cliched phrases. Well, you know what they are. Both sides have them, really, and it's not. It's just shouting it at people, and you don't get any further. Nobody's mind is ever changed. They just get more angry. The more they hear the other people get angry, the more angry they become, and there's no joy.
Which is where I feel we need some form of TV show at the moment to say, well, hold on, this is just, the interviews are ridiculous. Yeah. They're ridiculous from the politicians' point of views who don't say anything. I interviewed Harriet Harman on here. It's really interesting, actually. And she was great. I really enjoyed her company. And Alistair Campbell I've interviewed on this podcast. Both of them I found interesting. Especially with Harriet Harman, though, she keeps talking and doesn't stop. And I think it's because she's so used to being interrupted and questioned that she thought, I just keep going, making my point.
Yes, they don't put a full stop. They talk over the full stop, don't they? Yeah.
Towards the end of the interview, if you listen to it, we start just having a normal conversation because she's going, this guy's not going to challenge me on everything. I don't want to challenge her. I want the viewers, the listeners or the viewers, whichever way medium you're watching this, I want them to make up their mind. I'll ask the questions, and then you can decide whether Harriet Harman's got good ideas or bad ideas. And that's the way I see it going. But I really do think we've created I keep on calling it the superstar journalist at the moment, who want to be as famous as the people they're interviewing.
Yes, and I think that's very true. But it's a three-cornered problem, isn't it? Both sides of the argument are trying to win by getting in their sound bites, getting the party line out. And the interview is also a problem, partly because they think interviewing, all the great interviewers I know, the three best interviewers I know, David Frost, Melvin Bragg, and Kirsty Young, and they're all people, they do it well because they're listening, nearly always listening, and secondly, because they're predisposed to like everyone.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
And so you go into you find you, and of course you like them because you can hear they're listening, and they're obviously being nice to you, and you say all the things you would never say to John Humphreys, do you know what I mean? You can't help it. You say, David, I just want to share something with you. I promised my wife I wouldn't tell anybody, but I just... And the same with Kirsty. You know, my Desert Island Disc is famous because I couldn't remember what I'd said to her. I was so interested in talking to her. I got lost. And when I came out, I said to my wife, I can't remember anything I've said. I think I've said something horrible. She gave me a look afterwards, which is, oh no, I've nailed this guy.
Yeah.
No, so, and actually, you know, talking to you, it's the same thing. You know what? It's like... You want to be a good portrait photographer. Do you know what the secret is?
No.
It's nothing to do with your lighting equipment or even having an eye. It's make the subject like you.
Yes.
And then they relax, and then you get a photo that they're happy with.
Yeah.
And the same with you. I've forgotten what I've said already because I'm so enjoying being here. You have to go to life with no expectations. That's what I try to do. I sort of think is I don't know what this is going to be like. I'm just going to be even about it. And then you get a treat. You get a surprise. It's so interesting. I didn't think it was going to go this way. And that is the trick. It should be the trick in everything, in politics and in, I don't know, careers, is the nicer you are to people, the nicer life you have. Isn't that odd? Because we've all been taught, no, we must stand up for their... All of these people are about, be cruel, that kind of thing.
That was very much the atmosphere when I worked in TV. I started 20 odd years ago in TV, and I had to apologise to everyone I worked for. I had this show called Soccer M for years. I was the producer, writer, and presenter of it. We took it for 11 years. 20 years ago I started. We took it for 11 years. It was fantastic. Really enjoyed it. The bosses above us had no interest, because they were doing sport and we were doing entertainment sports channel and we were rating well. It was really weird that we didn't have commissioning editors talking to us all the time. They're just going, keep going. And so we could just mess about and people liked it because we were messing about. We made so many mistakes and every time we made a mistake, we would just do it again the next week. Go, that was funny, it was rubbish, let's do it again. And people enjoyed it.
And they enjoyed the mistakes, of course.
They loved the mistakes. They really loved the mistakes. My favourite thing I ever did was we had an item which didn't work and we knew it wasn't going to work. So rather than put another item in, I sat in silence for 2.5 to 3 minutes and we just sat and read the paper. People loved it. We did nothing.
That's
and it was just like, we've got a hole in the show, so we've got nothing to fill it. I'm really sorry, you just have to watch us do that. So I can't remember the point I was making there. What were we discussing?
I don't think it matters. It don't.
I can't.
No, I mean all this stuff. It's like it's the same with school. What's the right answer? Well, there isn't really a right answer to gravity. We don't really understand it. I'm sorry. I know you're not supposed to say that, but actually, gravity is the least understood of the fundamental forces. It may not even exist. People want an answer and they want a result, they want a metric, and then they want to know which position are you in the class. And the same with television, particularly in politics, is, put him on the spot, tell him he's wrong. Why don't you agree? Well, I think, Minister, that's a very good point you've made. What a good policy. That's a very thoughtful idea. And why don't the politicians also, as they like, one of my friends, a guy called Alan West, he ran the Navy, he was First Sea Lord. And he got offered a job by Gordon Brown as Minister of Security. I don't know if you remember that. He's a very nice guy. But of course he has no training in politics at all. So every time he went on the Today programme, he'd say what he thought. What do you think about defence? Well, he said, I think we're in a big trouble here. We don't have nearly enough ships in the Navy. And then he'd leave the studio and Gordon Brown would call up and say, what the hell are you doing? You've just given away something we're not supposed to say. Go back on the Today programme and say, no, the Navy's marvellous, it's really enormous. And he got in trouble all the time simply for telling the truth.
Yeah. Which I believe is the key to life, by the way. The
Of
truth
course,
is the key
of
to life.
course.
I know what I was going to say to you. Everyone I worked in TV, it was cutthroat and it was perfection. And you had to... This was the era where, you know, if you don't do that, you're going to get fired. If you make a mistake, it was very much... it's quite aggressive TV when I was in it. I think it was the same in all the tabloid newspapers, actually all the newspapers, and possibly all the way through to radio, you'd know from your perspective. And when I used to push my guys so much, so hard, we need more ideas, you know, there was no such thing as HR in those days, and you would go and see HR, you were working 12-hour days, whether you liked it or not. We created a great product and we all loved it, and I had to apologize to them. I said, I now know that it's nonsense. You can create great TV by working normal hours and having a life. You know, you don't need to put that thing. It was just a phase that everyone was going through. Did you experience that?
Well, not only that, Tim. I think you've been living my life. It's like, it's the most extraordinary thing. And I think there are so many similarities to that. So I was in my mid-40s before I thought, the values I used to believe in are, you know, hard work, intelligence, what else? You know, success, that kind of stuff. I was probably in my mid-40s. I thought cheerfulness. That would be a good thing. Do you have to be grumpy all the time?
Yeah.
You know, does everything have to be such a burden? What about being kind to people? Does it always matter that if somebody's wrong, you don't have to bawl them out? You could just say, okay, it's fine, it happens, no problem. So it is a different way of looking at things. And yes, of course, I recognize everything you've been saying.
What a wonderful thing. Just going back to QI, I want to move on to Museum of Curiosity. If you just got a few minutes, I'd like to talk to you about that. But every time you go to a pub or you're having a conversation with someone will tell you a fact, and they'll come out. They're all off QI, aren't they, basically? the facts from QI. And people now go, I saw on QI, because it's now regarded so highly.
We're quoted as an authentic source.
Basically better than Wikipedia, because you can probably rely on you more than Wikipedia.
Well, because it's curated, that's the thing. And there's that book you have there is, there's a whole bunch of people turning in the stuff off Twitter and off Instagram and off the program and the radio show. And so everyone's contributing. And then it usually gets shaped by James, our senior researcher, who will sort of winnow it into a shape, and then Anne's the sort of editor day to day, and she does the next stage, and I'm the final polish guy. Right. So then I go in and I take out things I'm not interested in, or things that I don't understand. I try to change, and then I try and make it as all those neat shapes. You see, they look like the little architectural shapes. The way the facts are laid out on the page. Yeah, it's quite difficult to do this. So I do that, and as a result of changing, I don't know, X% of the book with facts that I've got from my daily list, they then go back to James, and James takes half of them out again, because he fact checks those, and those go out, and then there's other stuff that we find they've appeared in a different form in one of the other books, and so on and on and on it goes, and it's almost never ending. Then we have a brilliant proofreader and copy editor who then has other queries to go, and so on. It's a process of constant layering, rather than there is that at Wikipedia actually, because there people are like a hawk on it, but it isn't formalistic. There isn't a formal hierarchy system. It's anybody can edit anything they want, and sometimes you get these weird results. Have you ever had your Wikipedia page edited by somebody? Yeah. It's a very strange...
Poorly, yeah.
Yeah, no, famously, there's he's not a QI elf, but he's a guy called Ian, who is an absolute super nerd. I mean, a brilliant fact person. And he's also one of those Wikipedia editors, right? Self-appointed. And he came to QI once, and Alan was going on at the bar, and he said, somebody's been editing my Wikipedia entry, and they put all this nonsense in about where I was at school or whatever. And Ian said, oh, it's me. And I said, it was you? He said, so I changed that. And Alan said, why did you change it? I keep changing it back again, and you keep changing it. And he said, well, you haven't got a source. And Alan said, I am Alan Davies, I am the source. The guy said, I'm sorry, it's not formal, it doesn't not allowed.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant. I gave up. Mine just used to change constantly.
Yeah, no.
People had given me abuse, so I just left it in the end. When you get a fact like 26 tons of clothing abandoned each year at the start line of the Boston Marathon, doesn't your brain then go immediately, which it does obviously for the show? What happens to the 26 tons? You end up obviously going down a rabbit hole, don't you?
Yes, and of course there are minor things like, do you mean metric tons or do you mean American tons? All those arguments go on, believe me, and it'll be double and treble checked, and whether it's exactly the right figure, and still we make sometimes errors. There's actually one in the press release I saw yesterday, which is somebody's missed a figure off. It says it's 693 kilometers from Buenos Aires to Brighton or Glasgow or somewhere. It's nothing like that. It's 11,000 kilometres, but it's managed to get through, I suppose because, there you are, the hierarchical control system doesn't work on press releases because the senior researcher isn't required to check press releases for accuracy. He's only required to do the stuff that we do for work.
Right, I want to ask you a quick question on Museum of Curiosity, which is the show. How would you describe it for anyone who's not seen it?
Museum of Curiosity is the format of the show. It's a virtual museum of infinite extent, which has a vast steering committee of experts who advise on the contents of the museum, and we're trying to slowly fill up, which is impossible because it's infinite. fill the plinths of this vast edifice. And so each week we have three experts. It could be an astrophysicist and a novelist and a dancer or a guitarist, or anyway, somebody who really knows what they're doing. Lots of scientists. And I am the professor of ignorance at Southampton University, which I am. And each series have a curator of the museum. So it's always a comic.
Start with Bill Bailey, then Sean Locke, John Richardson, Dave Gorman, Jimmy Carr, Humphrey Kerr, Phil Jupiter. The list is
They're amazing,
endless.
aren't they?
Yeah,
and Lee Mack's doing it at the moment.
Lee Mack,
he's brilliant.
So the question I have is really interesting. I've become fascinated with watching comedians because there's a lot of amazing comedians. There's some who do just sort of the run-of-the-mill stuff, but I'm really... which is not really fair of me to say because I can't do it at all. But I'm fascinated by watching them all construct their jokes. You must now have worked with so many comedians. Is it amazing the different way they construct the replies to get the laughs?
This is such a difficult question. You wouldn't think, would you, this would be the difficult question, but this is the hard one. I often say I've often been asked to be a professor of comedy or media at universities, but I've always said no because I said I've been in comedy for more than 40 years and I still don't understand it.
Yeah.
Ignorance, I know about. I'm very ignorant. I'm an expert in that. But the mystery of comedy, particularly when you watch someone like Lee, who is so smart, he's unbelievably quick. I mean, the way his mind works, I've no idea. I mean, he really should be the subject of a proper scientific study. And of course, all the great comedians, you cannot see the architecture of the joke.
That's it, that's what I
mean. It just comes
yeah.
from nowhere.
Yeah.
And they always say there's only 7 jokes. Well, I don't think so. But the way that they twist information, and it is, Arthur Koestler wrote a brilliant book about it called The Act of Creation, and it compares creative scientists and comedians and how they think in a similar way, which is very often turning it upside down, whereas everyone else is going on the same line. Everyone else thinks, obviously the Earth, the sun goes around the Earth. You can see it. You're standing on the Earth and the sun goes up overhead and down the other side and it comes around again, obviously. And Copernicus comes along and says, if it was the other way around, how would you know?
Yeah.
And they'll go, don't be ridiculous, you're a Polish monk. Go back and build some things, Go away.
Yeah.
And it takes, years and years for him to be proven right.
But there's lots of comedians. I see it all the time because I have them on my show. And, they're all, as I say, they're all better than me. But a lot of them do the sort of punchline, punchline. Then you get Lee Mack and I have no idea where the joke's coming from.
No.
And that is where you get the I mean, Bob Mortimer, that guy is unbelievable. He just a joke from nowhere. Just sort of,
yes. He is Bob is so special.
It suddenly just emerges from literally nowhere. This joke, which just has people crying. It's incredible. The way he sets them up.
I mean, it's a different order of good. It's a bit like actors, that you can sort of triage actors into three kinds: the people who, probably a bit like you and me, that can probably remember a few lines and might even be able to do a funny voice. Probably you could be in a cameo, and perhaps you have been. Have you done any acting?
I'm not very good at it. I'll be honest with you.
Well, you may be one of those, the third thing, but
oh dear.
The middle people are like me. I did a bit of acting at school and university, and I can remember stuff. I can take direction, do what I'm told, and all that. Do a few funny voices, and then there are the people you really shouldn't be actors at all, and who really should be a model or something. It's what it is about. They want to be looked at. Yeah. And then there are people like Jim Broadbent or Miranda Richardson or Alec Guinness or thousands of people. I know Maggie Smith. I can't. Thousands of people. What they do. I mean, they're doing the lines, and clearly they're standing where the director asks them to, but they're doing a different thing, aren't they? They're creating magic, and they are completely the person that they purport to be. And that is something, I don't know how that was. The same with comics. I mean, there are people, I can tell jokes, but I would never claim to be, a Sean Locke or a Bill Bailey or a Billy Connolly or an Eddie. These people are doing...
Amazing, aren't they?
Think of Eddie Izzard when he burst on the scene, or Billy Connolly's another one. A bridge has been crossed. There was before Billy Connolly and there's after. And Eddie Izzard, the same thing. When you saw his shows, you go, I don't understand what's happened. It's like somebody's discovered a new chemical element or something.
Mighty Boosh, the first time I've...
Noel, it's another one.
Noel's amazing. But Noel with Julian,
I know they're both amazing,
absolutely
aren't they?
incredible.
They're just amazing. And
when I went to see that Boosh show live, I was sitting... I was hurting because I was laughing so much. I think they really captured a time, those two, at that stage. Yeah,
it's also really why it's so different. There's such a problem in the media with comedy, because you can't box tick comedy. Everyone who's ever any good is breaking all the rules.
Yes,
they're just all the rules. Mighty Boosh. This is not going to work. There's not a chance of giving this commission. These people are sick. They shouldn't be allowed out, let alone on television. Yeah. And then you see it, you go, this is like my kids. My daughters particularly, the fact that I know Noel Fielding is like, I'm a god.
That's brilliant. Are you excited about the change of TV at the moment? It is dramatically changing with Netflix, isn't it, on demand? Does that excite you, or...
It does excite me, actually, and... whether it will last, the thing is that the problem with good ideas is anytime somebody has a good idea, usually all the people who would never have had the idea come roaring over the horizon and say, I'll do that now. And you can see it if you go back to Christianity. So there's a bloke carpenter in a desert who goes out in the desert, goes, I've got a good idea. Why don't we all be nice to each other? And he comes back and he says, hey, guys, we should all be really nice to people. And they all go, this is amazing. This is such a good idea. And they all start being nice to people. So the Roman Empire comes along and says, this is popular. We should own this. So they come on, they rewrite the Bible, they make it the state religion, and they start dressing people up in robes and tiaras and, having palaces and, all this kind of thing. And there's Jesus going, no, it was just about being nice. It's not about the palaces. Yeah. And similarly, I think you can see what's happened to the internet. When it started, wasn't it a joy? It was an adventure playground, a mad jungle. People were terribly nice who went on talk boards because there were only a few of you. If you go back and look at the original talk boards on QI, the conversation is unbelievably good. There's no abuse, none. Everyone's trying to understand the other person and being charming. And what's happened with these new platforms? You've got all these very exciting, started with AMC and Breaking Bad and Mad Men. They were their two big hits, weren't they? And they were a movie channel, so they had no idea how anything worked, so they just let people do what they do. So this starts where HBO is to some extent the same thing. When Netflix comes along and starts doing their own original content, of course they leave you alone. They don't interfere and stuff. The trouble is, once it becomes a monetary issue, and that I think is Netflix's problem, they owe, I think it's $140 million for every paid-up subscriber. That's how in debt they are.
Wow.
It's a really big number.
How are they getting that
I apologise
back?
if it's not right. Well, they've borrowed billions to make it work.
How are they going to get it back?
Well, by getting more subscribers, and it's a race, can they get enough subscribers before the investors start saying, Amazon seemed to have done it. You know, they were not in profit until, was it last year they started making profit? And Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world on the basis of an enormous amount of debt, essentially. And debt financing is the way it works.
I quite like the fact that Netflix don't release their ratings to anyone, which means if you take a show like, say you took QI and it wasn't rating at all, rather than just axe it, which is because the press start sharpening their knives and Stephen Fry's not got it, or Sandy Toxvit doesn't do, and they get rid of it. They go, well, we're not releasing we're just going to put quality out there, which is things that we think are quality. And you know, Noel Gallagher always said that the problem with researching music, which is what they did at all the radio stations, people don't know what they want.
Yeah, same with anything, same with politics.
Yeah, they don't know what they want, so you've got to kind of find something and give it to them and say, do you want this? You can't just keep on going with the same old crap all the time.
No, and it's a false democracy that you say, well, we should ask people what they want and give them that kind of television. But the thing is, that's not your job. Your job is to give people something they could never have imagined. That is what you're paid to do.
Oh, well, I'm glad you say that, because I'm going to pitch to you, because I've always pitched this idea. I actually literally pitched it once as a joke. And now I think it might happen.
Not monkey tennis again,
No,
is it?
it's not. It's close. I wanted to do a show called Dawn, and the reason why I like this, what I like so much about on-demand TV is I noticed that all the programs I watch, their durations are different, and they're on demand. So I always wanted to do a live TV show, and now I think the first time ever people go, do you know what, that could be a good idea, because it changes its time slot as it goes through the year. So, so in the winter you've got a nighttime show.
That's fantastic.
And in the summer it's a lot. In the summer it's a lot later, and in the winter it's kind of coming in at tea time. Look, the sun's even starting to come down now when we're doing this. So that was always I didn't have any content for it. It was just it was just the idea it was going to be live, and the show changed its total format because of the weather, because of the.
That's a brilliant idea. No, I love that.
Yeah, but now I think someone might make it, because we're getting to that. You know, we're not getting tied into schedules anymore, are we?
Well, they won't make it. Because
that was exactly what happened when I pitched it.
Even if they did, the person was mad enough to do it and found it very successful. You then found there was not just a program called Dawn, but one called Yawn and Porn and Morn, and they would all be a sort of, you know.
Sorry, it's not called Dawn. It's called Dusk. Sorry, I was just sorry. I've just
either. See, I've already done it. You do one called Dusk.
Yeah,
you get very good ratings for it, and I then come along and say, let's do one called Dawn, but with cakes.
Yeah, Dawn works.
You have cakes in it.
Yeah. No, Dusk. Sorry, I really ruined my pitch then, didn't I? Can't even think of the right word. So let me ask the questions I ask all the guests who come on. What one piece of advice would you like to give our listeners that has been invaluable to your life?
I wrestled with this one, Tim, and I realised that most of the advice I've been given most of my life is wrong. Most of it's wrong. Mm-hmm. Shut up, sit down, don't rock the boat, do as you're told, those kind of things. Try to be top, those kind of things. And I think that's what partly went wrong with me. I spent 40 years going in the wrong direction, thinking that, you know, and actually... I know the best piece of advice I was ever given, which was when I was about 13 and went on to senior school, and a prefect said to me, Lloyd, you shouldn't worry so much. You know, it's ridiculous at 30. Stop worrying. And that is very good advice, but I never took it.
Stop worrying. Okay.
It is, but I would say all these things, the advice you get given, which are basically, they're school rules, aren't they? Shut up, sit down, you know, do as you're told. Don't muck about. All those. Don't muck about. Everybody should muck about all the time. That's where all the good ideas come from, you know.
Do you feel mentally well now, health-wise, mental health-wise, as they call it, depression-wise? Do you feel well now?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think these things ever go away. I think you've always got a predisposition to get low. I'm very lucky because Harry, my son, and I talk about this all the time, so that I've got somebody, a sort of mentor that I can always speak to. So if he goes down, I'll help him up, and vice versa. So it's very short-lived these days, those kind of things. But generally, it's not really good or bad or anything. It's what is. You know, this is what is, and you've got to make the most of it, haven't you?
Well, I've been thinking about it a lot recently, and a lot of people give advice on this podcast about depression. I've talked about my depression, and I've started to believe, and I hate to say this because I don't want people to take it the wrong way and think this is good advice. So I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I kept on saying I was suffering from depression. I want to get rid of the word suffer and go, I had depression, because I'm starting to believe depression's not a bad thing. It's a way that you're telling your brain and your body and everything, because it's painful, as we all know, that your life's broken and you need to change it, because what you believe in, as you've just said, all those things that people told you, and what you're doing with your life, and when you're trying to get a new car, and that's your aim in life or something like that, and when you change it all and get rid of the attachments, get rid of it, you move on, and then you feel in a better place and happier. So I'm starting to believe that there could be a slight, reluctant to say this, positive spin on depression. When you've got it, think, I need to change my life. This is me telling myself to change my life.
I would definitely say you see it as a signal that something's awry, but it isn't. What happens to most people with depression is they fall into self-pity. I'm so unhappy, and my life's terrible, everyone's so horrible to me, nobody's helping me. And like Copernicus and looking at whether the world went round the sun or vice versa, depression's a perfectly logical thing. If you look at the bad bits of the news, what's happening in, I don't know, Somalia today, or not particularly Somalia, but in terms of horrible civil wars, or all the dreadful things that people do to each other around the world, it's rational to be. It's very depressing. It's also rational to say, this is amazing. The sun comes up, the trees are fantastic. I had such fun at this show last night in the Soho Theatre. I was crying with laughter at a show I didn't expect even to like. There's so much good. Every tree is a miracle. Every pigeon's a miracle. You just flip it on its head, There's no requirement to be depressed, and everyone has shit. That's the thing. Everybody's life is tough. And honestly, I can say this because I had to say it to me, pull yourself together. What are you complaining about? And that was the thing for me, particularly. I had nothing to complain about. I was really cross that I could see it was ridiculous I was depressed because I had nothing to moan about. And then you think, well, that's because, like you say, it's a signal. You're doing the wrong thing now. You don't need to do cheese commercials anymore. You've got the house, okay? Give somebody else a go at earning a few bucks. Yeah. Go and do something you believe in. And that took me 10 years to work that out.
Any life hacks?
Yeah, I got 2 life hacks. One is a little one, which is if you like to cook, which I do. I read this in a book, 20 years ago, when I used to cook a lot when I was a commercials director. Instead of hanging the tea towel up like you have on the Arga or the Everhot or whatever that is, as you cook, and you pick up the hot saucepan, you put the tea towel back, and then you go and you chop the thing, and then you wipe your hands on the tea towel and so on. You put the tea towel in your back pocket, so it follows you around, so you don't have to keep going backwards and forwards the oven and the fridge.
Great tip.
It's a really neat
That's
thing.
a good one, yeah.
And the other thing is very useful for parents, which is, if you've ever been a parent, you'll know the thing when you're on the phone or trying to read the paper, or you're having a glass of wine with your other half because it's been a long day, and the child comes in, Daddy, Mummy, yes? Can you come and play Lego? Or can you help with my homework? Or, Teddy's not feeling very well, whatever it is. And you say, now look, Mummy and I have had a very long day, and it's our time now. Go to your room. Go back, or whatever you do. But you always say, "Hey, yes, all right, Jolyon. I'm on the phone to Los Angeles tomorrow, okay, or later, whatever." Don't do that. Never do that. Whenever any of your children ask you to do anything, no matter how silly you think it is, or how important, or how inconvenient it is, put the phone down, put the glass of wine down, put the newspaper, go and do whatever it is they want. Read them the story, do up their pajamas, wipe up the mess, whatever. Do it immediately without questioning. After about a year, if you do it every time, they'll stop asking. Because when children know that you're always there for them, whenever they want them, if they have a nightmare, if they're sick, if they just want you to play with their toys, they don't need you anymore. And you'll have a very peaceful life, and you can have as many glasses of wine as you want.
Great life hack, fantastic.
It really does work too.
Have you got a book you can recommend to us?
Well, since we've been, again, it's strangely, it's actually weird, Tim, because I had no expectation. All I knew was these 4 questions you were going to ask, the ones you just asked. Yeah. So I went with my gut, and I had no idea we were going to be talking about depression and philosophy and so on. I had, weirdly, chosen 2 books on how to be happy, or about happiness. And one is a wonderful book by Derren Brown called Happy. What's the title? The subtitle is Why Everything is More or Less Absolutely Fine. Have you come across this?
No.
Very good. You wouldn't expect, would you, that Derren Brown's also a philosopher?
Oh, I started reading it. It's all about philosophers, isn't it? Yes, I did start reading that. And at the beginning, I loved it. Yeah.
And I've known Derren for, years and years. And he's a great friend of Stephen Fry's. And he's done drawings for QI albums. And he's a brilliant artist apart from anything else. Apart from being... He's one of those people... The first time I saw Derren Brown on television, I told him this at Stephen Fry's 50th. I said, you are one of the few people who's moved television on. I think his shows are among the best telly you can see, along with some of the ones I've mentioned. So there's that. And the other book on happiness is called The Happiness Hypothesis, and it's by a guy called Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. The Happiness Hypothesis, putting ancient wisdom to the test of modern science. And again, it's taking these ancient philosophies that, unless you've started reading them and struggled through them yourself, you'll think, well, why would I be interested in some mad fat guy sitting cross-legged in a dress on an Indian temple? I have no interest in him. It's odd. But it takes the precepts of everything from ancient Stoicism and Buddhism and Epicureanism, and, like I said earlier, puts them to scientific tests. Do these actually work? And the answer is definitely yes. And I so loved this book. I had to give a speech at the University of Birmingham last year, which is an annual lecture about happiness, and I'd just been reading this book, and it inspired me to talk to 1,000 people in this hall. It's really, really good. And the thing is, it's to try to make those people who are listening to this by accident, who haven't come here because they know you're depressed and they don't know anything about philosophy, to make them see that all philosophy is why am I here, and how could I be happier? That's all. I just want to be happy. Yeah. And the answer is you will never be happy if you think, if I had a bit more money, if I had another million, if I had another 10 million, what if I had 100 million? No, you don't. And again, science shows there's a point at which you earn where you don't get any happier no matter how much more money you get, or a tiny bit. And similarly, the same is, and you know this because you're famous, I'm not, but fame, it's great fun in a way, but you don't. The more famous, you don't get more happy the more famous you get.
You are famous, aren't you? You're very famous in our industry.
But yeah, as a name, yeah, sometimes. But you have to really, you have to be a nerd to know who I am. If I went to the Soho Theatre last night, and there was this fantastic actor on the show called Ed Gaughan, G-A-U-G-H-A-N, and I'd never seen him before. One of the funniest people I've seen on stage in 10 years. I went up to him after and I said, "Hi, I'm John." He said, "Oh, hi, I'm Ed." I said, "I just thought to say you were fantastic." And he said, "I know who you are." Do you? He said, yeah, you're the soundtrack of my childhood," he said. Isn't that lovely?
That's really cool. But don't you get, because of your celebrity in our world and because of your success, perceived success as everything was successful you've ever done, as we think, don't you get people pitching like nonsense like Dusk at you all the time,
Like what?
Dusk, my show.
I do, and I generally say there's no point in asking me because what I think doesn't count anymore more in television, and I don't really want to read your sitcom. I'm really sorry. I've read a lot of them.
All right, final question. What is the meaning of life?
Oh no, that came out of a blue sky. What is the meaning of life? It's really rather a long answer, that. I'm trying to think of a way I can put it in a sound bite. Very, very silent. It's gone very, very quiet, hasn't it? I can't think of a way of putting it in well, I would say this. There definitely is one. And it's not what you think. And like everything else, it's both extremely comforting and very scary. It's a paradox, in other words. And the second thing I'd say is, which sometimes people do ask me this on stage. I wasn't expecting it, so I'm being so fumbling about it. But I say these two things. They say, do you know the meaning of life? And I say, yes, I do. And they say, what is it then? I say, well, the first thing is, if I tell you, you won't believe me, so there's no point in telling you. And the second thing is that you have to find it out for yourself, because only by going on the journey yourself will you A, believe it, and B, uncover the truth. That's what I think, and I'm not teasing here. That's what I think. But there is a very old saying. Why it's taboo to talk about it any more than that is that he who knows does not speak, and he who speaks does not know.
Okay. I'm not satisfied. All right then. One more then. Is there an afterlife then? We've talked about Buddhist reincarnation.
Okay, well, the question, maybe it's the other way up. Is there a before death, as it were? Is it, which way around is it? Is it, this is Chuang Tzu. The famous thing that Chuang Tzu, the guy I mentioned earlier, said was, he dreamt he was a butterfly, and when he woke up, which way round was it? Did Chuang Tzu dream he was a butterfly, or did the butterfly dream he was Chuang Tzu?
Okay.
Is this, for example, are we actually dead, waiting for life to happen? Could it be the other way around? So I would say, I'll answer that less gnomically, as it were. This I believe to be true, that consciousness does not die. Okay, there's a thing called the law of conservation of matter, which says that matter cannot be created nor destroyed. You've heard this?
No.
It's a core scientific principle. Mm-hmm. It can only change state. All right? So that's the reason why there are atoms in your body today that are the same atoms that were once inhabited Cleopatra or Julius Caesar.
Okay.
So it's constant. The amount of matter in the universe or the solar system is constant. It just changes shape all the time.
Yeah.
Consciousness also is indestructible. That's what I believe. And so you, whoever you are, and this is why it's so important to ask and to know, whatever it is you are in essence, we know it's not your haircut. We know it's not your sporting career. I doubt if your breakfast bar is all that important in deciding who Tim Lovejoy is. But there's something of you which is indestructible, and that doesn't die. I don't know whether you'll have hair or not, Tim. That's the bad news.
John, thank you so much. A lot of food for thought there. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. The book 2024 Facts is out now. What's your other book you've got out at the moment?
This is the wonderful QI podcast. I can say that because I have nothing to do with it. Called No Such Thing as a Fish. Who brought out their second book, which is called The Book of the Year 2018. It's your guide to all the weirdest news of the year. It's a genuinely laugh out loud funny book because I saw it for the first time last night. It's great.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. And when's the radio show on? Is that
the Museum of Curiosities on Monday nights at 6:30 and Sundays at 12.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's been really, really interesting. Thanks.